CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello there, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Israeli retaliation. The military strikes targets in Syria, saying 6 rockets were fired from there into the Golan Heights. Simulations in the Taiwan Straits. China carries out a second day of military drills after the island's leader returns from the US. Destination Ischia. The Italian island assures tourists that it's safe to return this Easter after a devastating landslide this year. And coming out of their shells, threatened loggerhead sea turtles are laying more eggs on western Mediterranean beaches. We ask if this is the upside of climate change. Israel says its jets have struck a military compound and other targets in Syria in response to 6 rockets fired overnight towards the Golan Heights, territory it controls. Syrian state media said explosions were heard near the capital, Damascus. Tensions have been high since Israeli police raided the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem during Ramadan prayers, prompting rocket fire from Gaza and Lebanon into Israel. Our correspondent Stephanie Freed reports now from Jerusalem on what has been a tense week as Muslim, Christian and Jewish worshippers mark major events in their religious calendars.
Easter, the holy month of Ramadan, and Passover overlap this year, which isn't necessarily problematic for the Christians, Jews and Muslims observing those holidays in Jerusalem. But this year is particularly challenging as escalation threatening to destabilize the city, country, and even region looms. Days ago, the situation spiraled after Israeli police brutalized Palestinians inside Islam's third holiest site, Al-Aqsa Mosque. Vowing to protect the mosque, Hamas militants in Gaza and Lebanon fired dozens of rockets and mortars on Israel. Israel's military hit back. A day later, a Palestinian assailant killed 2 sisters and critically injured their mother in a drive-by shooting in the West Bank. Hours later, an Arab resident of Israel killed an Italian tourist and injured 7 others by plowing his car into them as they walked along Tel Aviv's seashore. The convergence of events prompted Israel's military and security chiefs to announce they'll call up army reservists, deploy soldiers as necessary, and increase police presence nationwide. Although the latest rocket attack from Syria seemingly signals a newly opened front, analysts say rocket and mortar fire from Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza serve more as warnings, not escalation. Escalation can happen. It all depends on what transpires here in Jerusalem. Stephanie Freed, CGTN, Jerusalem.
Military troops deployed by China's central government have simulated precision strikes against Taiwan on a second day of drills around the island. Beijing says the first day of the drills focused on testing the ability to gain sea, air and communications control and has called the military exercises a serious warning to pro-independence forces. It follows the Taiwan leader's meeting with the US House of Representatives Speaker during a trip to America. Our correspondent Wu Bin reports now from Pingtan Island.
So for day 2, the focus is what Beijing calls a simulated precision attacks that targets Taiwan Island and its surrounding waters. And the Eastern Theater Command of the Chinese People's Liberation Army tonight released a simulated animation of the precision attacks. And from the animation, we can see that the missiles are launched from the rocket force, air force, and also Navy force that targets several locations in Taiwan and also many other locations in its surrounding waters. And so this is very important because according to Zhao Xiaozhuo, a research fellow of the Academy of Military Sciences of the PLA, that it's the first time that the simulated strikes on targets in Taiwan are mentioned in its public report. And Zhao also mentioned that the target could either be a building or a military base in Taiwan. And earlier today, the Chinese frigate Xuzhou, which was on a mission in the waters east of the Taiwan island, spotted a Taiwan frigate just 5 nautical miles away from it, and then it conducted tactical actions and tried to approach the frigate. And also the Eastern Theater Command also added for day 2 that they continue to maintain what it calls an approaching gesture around the Taiwan island.
We've been reporting there. Well, building bridges between East Asia and the West, Harvard University is holding its annual China Forum. The event is the United States' longest-running student-organised conference on China and aims to build understanding between the two countries. Our correspondent, Nathan King, reports now from Massachusetts.
很高兴今天晚上见到大家。
American students effortlessly switching from Mandarin to English, opening the 26th Harvard College China Forum. This gathering of China experts from the world of academia, government and business was founded a quarter of a century ago, when US-China relations were at a high point. Now, when relations are at a low point, this gathering is more important than ever.
We need to be optimistic about future relations between China and the US, the two greatest nations on earth.
This year's theme is finding common ground, suggesting some needs to be found between the two largest economies in the world. And speaker after speaker here stressed the strong links and even similarities between the US and China. But there was a heavy dose of reality too. And experts painted a picture of the strained relations between Beijing and Washington, much of which, they say, stems from the current US political climate.
In my judgment, if the leadership of the United States spent 1/20th of the time that we spend demonizing China actually working to solve the problems of this country, we would probably have a pretty good percentage of them licked by now.
So how do we find this common ground? Well, we sat down with one of Harvard's top experts on US-China relations who has plenty of experience advising top-level policymakers.
Sometimes bad things happen because the two sides understand each other and they have different goals. Sometimes bad things happen because the two sides misunderstand each other and they don't understand their goals. And forums like this one at Harvard and the many other places where China and the United States come together can't solve all those problems, but they can solve the ones that come out of the subset of problems that come out of misunderstanding.
Perhaps the wisest word so far at this forum was from Chinese cellist Yinbing Chu, who played a moving performance from the legendary classical composer Bach. He said that music is the only language that requires no translation and that real communication isn't so much about talking as listening. Nathan King, CGTN, Harvard University, Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Delegations from Oman and Saudi Arabia are in the Yemeni capital Sana'a to negotiate a ceasefire deal with Houthi officials. The talks are part of international efforts to end 8 years of conflict that have killed tens of thousands of people and caused a humanitarian crisis. The Iran-aligned Houthi group has been battling a military coalition led by Saudi Arabia since 2015. The peace move comes after China brokered an agreement last month between Riyadh and Tehran to re-establish diplomatic relations. Ukrainian authorities say a man and his 11-year-old daughter were killed in a Russian strike on a residential building in the southeastern city of Zaporizhia. It's the latest in a series of attacks on civilian targets in the region. Moscow says it has destroyed a depot containing 70,000 tons of fuel near to Zaporizhia and taken out a number of Ukrainian army warehouses that were storing ammunition and missiles. Authorities on the Italian island of Ischia, close to the Amalfi coast, are trying to reassure tourists that it's safe to return this Easter after a landslide that killed 12 people. 4 months on, there is still a state of emergency there as authorities work to protect the island from future extreme weather events. Hermione Kitson reports.
Ischia is a jewel of southern Italy, but there are still clear signs of a devastating landslide that enveloped everything in its path. Nicola Diorio survived the tragedy, but is one of 400 residents still unable to return home.
I was born here. I grew up here. I say that Ischia is a cursed paradise, but it is a paradise. I will never leave.
The night of terror was November 26 when record rainfall caused a piece of Mount Epomeo to collapse and crash down into the port town of Casamicciola La Terme. 12 people were killed, including 4 children.
Cars were rolling down the hill and it was a domino effect. There were trees, rocks, street lamps. I couldn't understand if it was a film or if it was actually happening.
Simonetta Calcaterra is the town's extraordinary commissioner and says experts are working hard to secure the red zone, an area also struck by an earthquake in 2017.
Hand by hand, as we clear the debris and secure the mountain, the red zone will get smaller and slowly residents can return home. We are also working to reopen streets and drain the port.
Authorities are investigating if illegal over-construction played a role in the disaster and how the island can protect itself from extreme weather.
Climate change will bring other intense weather events, but if the territory is able to respond in the right way, tragedies such as this won't happen again.
The tragedy has affected tourism on the island, which usually welcomes 6 million visitors every year. But while there's been a slow start to the spring season, authorities are confident of a successful summer.
While there's some concern from Italian travellers, there's a steady rise in international bookings for the peak season.
Thanks to important help of the institution, we had an international promotion, and now let's say that the moods and the feeling is all ready to welcome their clients.
There is a good level of requests from America and Northern Europe for the summer. We suffered a lot from the disaster last November, but we are rising and getting back to work.
Hopes that from the rubble, a rebirth is on the horizon. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Ischia.
While you're watching CGTN, still ahead. A taste of spring. The first leaves for one of China's most popular green teas are ready for harvest in Henan province. We'll take a sip after the break.
Roger, Ricky, last curve.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
This week on Razor, how saving one species can save an ecosystem. On the trail of European bison.
We have here, as you can see, a nice trail to thick vegetation here, which is done by the bison. It's one of the roads they have in nature. They basically create these pathways to thick vegetation where other smaller animals can't cross.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Israel retaliates with airstrikes in Syria after 6 rockets were fired from there into the Golan Heights. China carries out a second day of military simulations in the Taiwan Straits after the island's leader returned from the US. The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the Good Friday Agreement is an incredible moment in our nation's history. He will welcome the US President Joe Biden to Belfast on Tuesday to take part in events to mark the 25th anniversary of the deal. The agreement brought peace to Northern Ireland after 30 years of violence, known as the Troubles. Our correspondent, Peter Oliver, has been taking a look at some of the iconic murals in Belfast that help to tell the history of the conflict.
Belfast's murals, which once, before the Good Friday Agreement, were a symbol of the segregation in this city, have really become something of a tourist attraction in recent years. We're starting this small tour here in the east of the city, down by the docks, and what you can see just over my shoulder is a handshake across the divide and a call for no more. No more bombings, no more murders, no more killings, no more waiting every hour for children to come home, no more minutes to leave a building, no more fear of parked cars, and no more hatred. The artist behind this mural was a former pro-British Union paramilitary.
We had seen the conflict and the people, the killings and the murders, the bombings and the shootings had all sort of stopped, and basically I sat down with my grandson on the left-hand side, and we done the poem together, and as I said, he's the grandson of an ex-loyalist internee, and the young lady on the right is the niece of an ex-IRA man from the Short Strand, from the opposite side of the conflict.
What we are seeing more of is murals looking to depict other parts of Belfast's history other than the Troubles. Most notably, as you can see over my shoulder here, the Titanic. The ship was built here in Belfast's shipyards, but for every mural like that, you are loomed large over by a mural like this one depicting loyalist paramilitaries as the Troubles continues to loom large over the city's history. Here in nationalist West Belfast, it's a similar story with different characters from history emblazoned on the walls. Bobby Sands, the hunger striker who died in prison while on paramilitary charges, is one of the most photographed by tourists. Well, he's just down the road from murals depicting the need and urgency for the fight against climate change as Belfast's past sits alongside its future, thanks to the peace brought about by the Good Friday Agreement. Peter Oliver, CGTN, Belfast.
Police in the German city of Hamburg are warning of possible toxins in the air after fires broke out at several warehouses. 140 people were evacuated, and police say it's not possible to know how dangerous the situation is. People are being advised to avoid the area and to keep doors and windows closed. Benjamin Ferencz, the former Nuremberg trials prosecutor who secured the convictions of 22 Nazi death squad commanders, has died. He was 103. Harvard-educated, Ferencz was the last surviving prosecutor from the trials. He's believed to have died in the US state of Florida. The body of a large sperm whale which got stranded on a Bali beach has been drawing crowds of curious spectators. The cause of death has not yet been established, but an autopsy is being carried out before the whale is buried. Local officials say they found 18 beached whales just this week, which is unusual compared with previous years. Now, growing numbers of loggerhead sea turtles are nesting and laying eggs on western Mediterranean beaches. While this may seem like good news for a threatened species, some scientists suggest it could be a case of climate change causing habitat expansion. Michael Voss has more.
Loggerheads are the largest of all hard-shelled turtles and can grow to almost a metre in length. They're found in warm waters throughout the world, including Florida, Mozambique and Australia. Biologists and volunteers at a turtle rescue centre on Spain's Canary Islands are part of a project monitoring turtle populations across the region. And with rising sea temperatures in the Mediterranean, loggerhead turtles are increasingly nesting on beaches in France, Italy, Spain and Tunisia.
We believe that this trend happening along the Spanish, French and Italian Mediterranean coasts could be a new colonization process. One of the main causes to explain this trend could be global warming or climate change. Areas where turtles never used to reach because they were not suitable for laying eggs are getting warmer. And perhaps now that these areas are warmer, they are now suitable.
Their size and hard shells generally protect loggerheads from predators, but fish nets, ship propellers and pollution have become significant threats. Rapidly declining numbers saw loggerhead turtles placed on the endangered species list, but conservation efforts have eased the pressure and they've now been reclassified as vulnerable. With numbers growing around the world, this may also contribute to their expansion into new territories.
Another very important thing, another factor that we have to keep in mind is that most, or at least many of the sea turtle population have been under conservation projects for decades in their breeding areas. What this means is that many of these populations are improving. If a population is bigger, they begin to spread out.
Loggerheads may be one species taking advantage of warmer waters in the Mediterranean, but as more exotic species arrive, there are concerns that this could threaten food supplies and impact on native marine life. Michael Voss, CGTN.
Pope Francis has appealed for an end to all conflict in his Easter message, which he delivered from the central balcony of St. Peter's Basilica to a crowd of about 100,000 people. The 86-year-old pontiff called for calm in the Middle East and for peace in Ukraine. The Pope was hospitalised at the end of March to be treated for bronchitis. And another festival, the holy month of Ramadan, for Muslims around the world, is also a time for sharing blessings with loved ones and the less fortunate in society. In Somalia, young volunteers in the capital Mogadishu are preparing food to help internally displaced people break their fast, as Mohamed Kaye reports.
Since the start of the holy month of Ramadan, volunteers from various universities in Mogadishu have been camping here to prepare and distribute food for internally displaced persons to break their fast. They have been doing this for the past 5 years.
We provide iftar to about 400 to 600 poor and needy people every day. We take the prepared food packages to IDP camps and streets for distribution. I started this program in 2018. I am happy and delighted, and hopefully will continue doing this all my life.
The initiative is financially supported by generous contributions from well-wishers, mainly from the Somali diaspora community in Europe.
We get most of the financial support from our Somali diaspora community, mainly based in Norway and other parts of the world, including even here in Mogadishu, and that is how this noble program is possible and done here.
Some of the beneficiaries of the project say the support they receive will go a long way in helping them perform their religious obligation of fasting during the holy month.
We appreciate the young people for providing iftar. It is generous and we receive it on time. We thank the Almighty and appreciate them for their generosity.
With every passing day, the end of the holy month of Ramadan gets ever closer. This team of volunteers will be here preparing food for the poor for the remaining days. However, it is unclear just how the needy people will continue getting such support once the holy month ends.
This iftar project might not meet all the needs of the poor people in Mogadishu, but many people agree that it has transformed lives of the many of the beneficiaries. Ahmed Kahi, CGTN Mogadishu, Somalia.
Green tea from China's Henan province is regarded as one of the country's best. Its history stretches back more than a millennium, and at this time of year, the first leaves are ready for picking. Our correspondent Xiaorui Shui went to find out more about how the renowned Xinyang Miaojian tea is produced.
March and April are usually the busiest months for 37-year-old Zhou Zhengxiang, a tea farmer in Shangcheng County in central China's Henan province. The first green tea leaves in his 33 hectares of farm are ready for harvest. Tea sprouts harvested around Qingming Festival on April the 5th always have the freshest flavor. Although they're the most expensive, it can't stop Chinese drinkers and tea makers pursuing a taste of spring.
All the tea farmers here are racing against the time to harvest the tea. They need to plant, pick, process, and sell the tea in a span 1.5 months.
Shangcheng County is one of the core production areas of China's renowned Xinyang Miaojian tea. From picking to roasting tea leaves, Zhou is the 5th generation of his family to make Miaojian tea. In 2010, he set up a rural cooperative with local villagers in a bid to help alleviate poverty. The participation of the younger generation has injected fresh impetus into the local tea industry.
I think it's my responsibility to help our tea culture flourish, so I never regret that I left the big city and returned home to become a tea farmer in a rural area. Now more and more young people choose to come back and revitalize the countryside.
Now there are more than 620 tea companies and rural cooperatives with over 14,000 hectares of tea farms in Shangcheng County. In 2022, he has produced 5.2 million kilograms of tea, creating an economic value of 1.8 billion yuan. More than 120,000 residents are involved in the tea industry, providing them with regular income.
So far, the quality of our tea this year looks quite good, and the price is rising with an increase of 30 yuan per 500 grams. That's a good news.
We're also promoting the development of tea and tourism industries. There are several scenic spots in our county. I hope tourists can come here to admire the beautiful scenery and enjoy a cup of fresh tea here.
In recent years, traditional tea culture has gained popularity among young people in China. They enjoy tea not merely as a daily beverage, but also for its greater significance in their social lives. Thanks to modern technology, the time spent in making tea is lesser now than it was before, making it easier to meet the huge demand. Today, modern technologies have been widely introduced into various stages of tea processing, but many farmers insist on producing tea using manual labor. Zhou Zhengxiang is one of the small number of people that want to learn the manual tea roasting skills. It's a tough job and takes time. He needs to adjust the roasting technique and time depending on his feel of moisture content of the tea leaves. But he thinks it's totally worth it, and he hopes Chinese traditional tea culture will continue to flourish. 夏瑞雪 CGTN 商城 County, Henan Province.
And the headlines again. Israel has retaliated with airstrikes in Syria after 6 rockets were fired from there into the Golan Heights. China has carried out a second day of military simulations in the Taiwan Straits after the island's leader returns from the US. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. There'll be more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's Razor. For now, though, from all the team in London, goodbye.